and it's time to go. And we only have about 20 minutes together. And I definitely want to leave some time for question and answers. I'm a full-time professor at the University of Florida. My name is Brian Ray. I teach leadership and ethics. And the reason why the Wall Street Journal asked me to come talk about this topic, about trusted sources and news literacy, is my part-time job for them is I grab 3 leadership articles every week, and I put together a ready-made quiz for professors. So it makes their job easier. I do that as well for the topic of leadership. When we have faculty members who do so for the topics of accounting, finance, HR, OB, you guys got the idea, right? So the idea is, how do we make it easier for professors to have their students engaged in media resources? Now, before I talk about that in a little bit more detail, I want to let you know that my personal thought is we have a big, big crisis in higher education right now with the students that we're inheriting. And I think the crisis is a 2-part crisis. And I don't like to use that word crisis flippantly, but I think the challenge we have is as follows. When you survey freshmen, and UCLA has been doing so for well over 30 years, here's the response to the following question. Do you think it's okay to shout down speech you disagree with? The response from the freshmen that we're inheriting is 65% said yes. Now, what's even more alarming is when you ask, is it okay to resort to violence to shut down speech you disagree with? A quarter of freshmen say that's okay. Yeah, I see the squinting eyes right here. Guys, I'm not making the stats up, but for my generation, you're like, don't we come to college to hear things that are new to us and we don't understand? So we're already inheriting that kind of perspective. Again, this could be a function of what they see on social media. If they see a lot of really horrible things or hurtful things, I can imagine somebody being more receptive to that particular idea. Now, what's also problematic as far as the students we inherit is whether it's leaning left or leaning right, about 55% of students report that they are self-censoring themselves in the classrooms. They're just afraid to raise their hand and express an opinion. So this is very problematic. And the challenge also is all the more difficult when we know that students have a very difficult time understanding a narrative from a news story. Now, I want to give you one thing to write down that could be helpful in this regard. And it's interesting that this was actually put together originally for middle schoolers. But there's something called the Digital Media Literacy Project. And what's interesting is listen to these 5 key questions. Even though these questions are for middle schoolers, I really think the problem is we have a bunch of middle school level students who are coming to our classrooms right now. Here's number 1 question. Who created this message? I mean, very often now when I read an article, I scroll to the very bottom first. I want to actually see who wrote this and what their background is before I jump into it. Number 2, what creative techniques are used to attract my attention? Clickbait. Often you'll see titles of articles now that don't tell you what the article is going to say. So-and-so takes a position on X. You want to click because you want to know what the position is. Almost being tricked into it. Number 3, how might different people understand this message differently? It'd be great if the article offered us that. Number 4, what values, lifestyles, or points of view are included or omitted? And then number 5 is, why is this message being sent? So the issue I think we have right now, and I believe that librarians and the people who work in that field are well positioned to do this, we are inheriting a group of students who really are at the middle school grade level as far as understanding narratives, from news stories, from opinions. It all kind of goes together. So when you go back to your institutions, what I really hope you try to encourage to a faculty committee or to a provost, or particularly maybe somebody who's working in gen ed, is we can't assume that all these freshman students coming in understand how to take in a healthy diet of news and information. So I work at the University of Florida, go Gators, and it's very interesting because the middle of August, about 3 years ago, I got an email. It was from my friends at the Wall Street Journal, and they said, Brian, we just heard that the University of Florida is going to cancel their university-wide subscription to the Wall Street Journal. Now, if it didn't come from the Wall Street Journal, I'd have said this is misinformation. Okay, this can't be. This is like getting rid of the football team or the basketball team. I mean, this is a resource I know that professors use. This is the middle of August, and we have some professors who I know incorporate these articles into their actual courses. How could this be? So I know that sometimes the messenger is more important than the message. So I reached out to the chair of our faculty senate, and I said to her, I heard that our university is considering canceling the subscription. And she says, Brian, I'll look into it. And sure enough, she did. And the provost responded with 3 reasons why this was being canceled. And it was the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. 2 pretty important publications, I would think, to keep what I call intellectual athletes well-fed and informed. Response number 1 was, oh, it's too expensive. Well, if you take 50,000 students and 10,000 faculty and staff and divide it by the cost of subscription, it's 2.5 cents a person. I'm pretty sure that we can afford to spend 2.5 cents per student on a resource we hope makes them a little bit smarter, intellectually challenges them. Reason number 2, nobody's really using it. Well, of course, that's not technically correct. You can get down to the data, but if our students aren't using these kind of resources, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, whose fault is that? Professors. It's our fault. Librarians can say, please use all this great stuff. And you guys take that horse to the water. And we know the water's good, right? But who can make the horse drink the water? The professors. You will go read 3 articles from this publication and that publication, compare and contrast, synthesize, write a paper, or you're not going to pass the class. They will do it. So here's a provost saying nobody reads it. Well, that's because your faculty aren't getting off their duffs and doing real work and making students engage anything other than the 2 books they picked. And then question number 3 was the kicker, and this is where I think we all need to rally around the flag. The 3rd reason, again, number 1 was cost, number 2 was nobody uses it, but the 3rd one just drove me nuts. And this came from a senior academic leader. He said the students get their news other places. It's the same thing as saying, my kids aren't hungry. I feed them every single day. Candy, cotton candy, and Mountain Dew. It's sad, isn't it, that somehow that we don't understand that we're inheriting students who probably have middle school level issues. So the reason why I've been very happy for 5 years to be part of an organization that, whether it leans a little bit one way or the other way, I think for the most part, I can probably find 3 articles that talk about leadership that I think will have our students read about leaders from a wide array of areas, because I want them to read about the good leaders and the bad leaders, understand characteristics. Same thing with ethics. Ethics is one thing I'm very passionate about, and my 3 questions are almost always the same when I pick an article that has an ethical theme involved. Number 1, what did you find to be the most ethical, troubling issue in the article? I want them to have to figure, there's probably 3 or 4 in there, but which one do you pick and why? Question number 2, make an ethical argument in support of X. And what's question number 3? Make an ethical argument against X. And I'm pretty sure the students probably don't want to do one or the other, but this is making them have to do both. It's making them have to seek first to understand and then to be understood. So I just want to let you know that it's very important, I believe, for the university administrators to understand the kind of students they're inheriting. And they really, if we're trying to produce intellectual athletes through a 4-year program, we have to actually feed them intellectually well. And they're coming in with very unhealthy media consumption habits. So I would encourage you guys to definitely find a way that makes it easy for faculty to engage students in this material. And I also think it's very, very helpful to find a way to also have them engage with ideas with which they disagree. Because I think more and more in higher education, we are not doing a very good job in that regard. So I want to open up to questions about anything or techniques you've seen, challenges you've had, be they budgetary or faculty pushback or challenges of students. I'd love for this to be a way we really share some ideas here. But even a research-run university like mine almost had key tools taken away from intellectual pursuit for reasons I thought were very, very flimsy. Thoughts or questions? Yes, ma'am.
How did you advocate when the chopping block was there? Who actually made that happen? You didn't end up cutting the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, or did you?
No, they did not. I mean, part of the issue is I think it's also important to find out who the best messengers are. So obviously, I could not go to the provost and say, hey, please don't cut this because you know what? I have a conflict of interest. I'm an ethics professor, right? I can't say, hey, please don't cut the Wall Street Journal. They pay me a part-time paycheck. That's not going to work. But I went to who I believe, if we believe in shared governance, which many presidents say they do, many provosts say they do, I said, I'm going to reach out to the president of the Faculty Senate. And I just so happened to know that this was a resource that she was going to use in her class, which started in 8 days. My grandma's from Tennessee, bless her heart, she passed away. But Grandma Ray had really good advice, and my name in the South is one syllable, it's Brian. Okay? She said, Brian, son, don't you move a fence until you know why somebody went to all that trouble to put it up. Okay? Somebody went to a lot of trouble to actually buy this subscription, and we have thousands of professors who probably already incorporate this in their class, and we're just going to turn it off with no notice at all. So guys, I promise you, administrators don't get to their positions always because they're managerially sound, okay? You guys know this. A full professor, those skill sets are different than department chair, correct? And different than provost, right? We had a chief academic officer about to cut off access to 2 global publications that his faculty were using in 8 days. So it was very short-sighted. Plus, I also think when we have budgetary concerns, we have to really, really make sure that we're making decisions that aren't easy. I mean, it's very easy to cut off a publication versus fire somebody, right? You will almost always want to cut people last. But again, if you don't give the professors who remain the tools they need, or the students the tools they need to have a really good academic experience, it's definitely an example of penny wise and pound foolish. Other thoughts or questions? Well, guys, one solution I would offer with our challenge is, and this can be very controversial in many settings, because you guys have probably heard the joke, it's easier to move a cemetery than change a curriculum. And I promise you, hey, my 9 credits of social sciences, you're not touching that. Hey, my 9 credits of hard sciences, you're not touching. Hey, English 101 and 102, we have to have that. Well, okay, maybe we could talk about gen ed all day long, but can't we incorporate some kind of way that we access information well and understand it well throughout our gen ed curriculum? You know, an interesting quote was, it used to be you went to college because that was the place you went to learn and understand and try to maybe remember a certain base of knowledge. And you went there to get that knowledge. Let's be honest. It's all gettable. It's all gettable now, right? So the real issue is now not how do you get it, where do you get it, but do you know how to synthesize it and incorporate it and take things out that are probably things that aren't really true, accurate, etc. So again, I would suggest that maybe we need to figure out, and you guys know that when we have students come in, there are a variety of math tests to kind of place students. One's called ALEX, there's a math test. What about a digital media literacy test? Just have all of our incoming freshmen take it. And if you're not scoring X, well then you're probably not well prepared to engage in a poli-sci class, a history class, sociology class, anthropology, because you're going to probably fall prey to information that is not accurate. If you can't tell the differences, we need to stop that and help our students understand that. Don't send them out on a race unless we think they're well prepared to finish the race. Yes, ma'am.
I apologize. I came in late.
That's okay.
And so I might have missed it, but we had to cut both our Wall Street Journal and our New York Times, but it was because my budget was drastically cut, and we have access to it in, say, ProQuest. Not the nice front page headline type, but, you know, the articles themselves. How does that figure into student use? Is it much harder for faculty students to access that type of?
Do you mean they only have access to like the headlines or the first couple of paragraphs?
No.
No.
Because this is out of my purview, sorry. Can you guys help with this one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So accessing it through a database, so through ProQuest, I don't know if there are tools and resources that you can use. I'm pretty sure you have to search for what it is that you're looking for, so there's no really an opportunity to discover content serendipitously.
Well, I think you can limit, and that's what we teach our students to do.
There's no images, for example.
Right, it doesn't
Yeah, there's
look
no
as
images,
glossy,
videos.
pretty. It doesn't look as nice.
Right, and it's also on a delay too, so it's more of a I think, usually I explain it as it's more of a research tool, which has value. So it's not to say that it's not valuable, but if you're looking for what Brian's talking about with sourcing credible news and information and being able to feed that back to your students through professor tools, it's just two very different experiences is I think the best way to think about it. So it really functions like a personal digital Wall Street Journal account